test is in 4-part, Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, and Part 4. Now look at Part 1.
Part 1.
You'll hear 2 university students planning a computer programming lesson. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 4. Now listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 4.
Hi, Hardeep. Is now a good time for us to plan that computer programming lesson we've been assigned?
Hey, Dawn. I was just thinking about that, actually. Yes, let's get it out of the way now, shall we? I've got the instructions here. So, it says, design a 45-minute lesson for a class of 16 teenagers where they learn how to write a simple computer program in BASIC.
Now, I know, of course, that BASIC is the computer language people used to use back in the 1980s when they wrote programs on microcomputers, but I'm not sure I feel very comfortable teaching anyone about it.
Well, I did a bit of research yesterday and found out quite a few things, so I think we'll be okay.
Great. So, what do you have in mind?
Well, I think we should presume that none of the kids will know anything about BASIC. So why don't we start with a short multiple-choice quiz? It could focus on things like what BASIC is, what the letters stand for, when people used it, things like that.
That sounds good. I guess it shouldn't take long. Just the first 5 minutes of the lesson, something like that. I don't think we should make the students do it on their own, though. That'd make it too much like a test. Shall we let them do it in 2 so they can discuss their choices?
Yes, good idea. Then we'll go through the answers with them as a whole group.
Good. What next?
Well, I've had an idea for the program they could write. I'll tell you about that in a minute. I think the key thing is, though, that before they actually sit at their computers, and I think we should presume that they're doing this lesson in a computer room, they make a flow chart of what they want the program to do. That's usually the best way to start writing a program.
This flow chart will show all the different stages of the computer program, right?
Exactly. It's probably best if the teacher stands at the board and everyone works on that together.
Yes, otherwise they'll all come up with different flow charts and it'll get confusing.
Precisely. I imagine making the flowchart will take about 15 to 20 minutes.
Then they use that to write their computer program.
Well, actually, I think there's a stage before that. You see, the flowchart will be in English. They're going to need to be taught a few basic commands so they can write their computer program.
Now I'm getting out of my depth. What kind of thing would that be?
Well, for example, when you want text to appear on the screen, the command is print in capital letters, followed by the text you want to appear in double inverted commas.
Oh, yes. I think I've seen that before.
Right. So they'll need to be taught 5 or 6 commands before they use them to write their program.
Okay, so how shall we do that? With the teacher talking to the whole class again?
Well, we could, but it might be more fun to make it more like a competition, where there are a few teams competing against each other. Each team has maybe 4 or 5 people in it, and they have to do some kind of matching task. You know, they match the command print with to make text appear on the screen, something like that.
That sounds good. Teenagers love competing with each other.
Exactly. And then, for the final part of the lesson, they use their flowchart and the commands they've learned to produce the program. Let's presume, shall we, that there are 8 computers in the room, so that's 2 students for each computer.
That sounds reasonable. So, tell me more about your idea for the computer program they're going to write.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 5 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 5 to 10.
Okay, so it's a very simple program. I've actually written it down here so we can go through it together.
Okay, so the first line says 10 CLS. What on earth does that mean?
Well, every line of a basic computer program starts with a number. They usually go up in tens, so the first line is 10, the second 20, and so on. And CLS is the command we use in BASIC to clear the screen.
Oh, I see. So that's just telling the computer to start with a blank screen.
Exactly. Then we move on to the next line. So this one says 20, print, guess a number between 1 and 10.
Right, I see. That appears on the screen. It's not that difficult, is it, when you get the hang of it? Let's see if I can work out the next one. 30, input I. Oh, not sure about that.
Well, all that's saying is that the person playing types in a number. Input is the basic command for type in, and I just means any number you like.
Oh, okay.
Then what happens next depends on what the number is. So we've got 40 if I is less than 1, or if I is greater than 10. Then print. Bad choice.
Right, so if they type, say, 0 or 11, that appears on the screen.
Exactly. And then this next line takes them back to where it asks them to type in a number between 1 and 10.
That's line 50. I see. And line 60 says, if I equals 6, then print. Correct. Ah, okay. So if they've typed 6, they've got it right.
And if they haven't typed 6, which is the next line, then try again comes up on the screen, and that takes them back to where they choose another number.
It's clever. Well done.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Part 2.
First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Thank you very much for inviting me here today. I understand that you all own your own home, and some of you may be interested in buying additional property here in the city, so I hope you will find the information I am going to share with you useful and informative. I'm going to talk about the situation with property here in the city. The city centre of any area is obviously going to have the highest prices, and as more and more people are competing for houses in this area, both renting and buying are becoming increasingly difficult. It is most people's dream to one day own their own house. House ownership gives us a feeling of having achieved something, and we can see clearly what we have worked so hard for all our lives. It can give us a sense of security for our old age and a knowledge that we will hopefully have something to pass on to our children. However, buying a house, particularly for first-time buyers, is becoming more and more difficult, not only due to increasing prices, but also because of the need for a substantial deposit. For younger people, buying their first home is very difficult and often impossible. Young couples who cannot get the deposit together need to rent for a long time and sometimes forever. While traditionally homes near the centre of the city have been the most desirable, people are now looking further afield. This has happened for a number of reasons, the main one being that our style of work is changing, along with that of other countries such as the USA. In certain professions, for example sales and computing, it is no longer necessary for people to be based in an office full-time. More and more people are beginning to work from home, which means they can avoid the hustle and bustle of rush hour traffic jams into work and have more freedom to choose to live in a more rural and peaceful location. My company deals with finding property for both purchasers and renters in the city area. One of my main roles within the company is to find investment properties for people who wish to plan ahead for their future.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
An investment property is usually at the cheaper end of the market. People buy investment properties not to live in, but in addition to their own home in order to rent it out to other people. The advantage of putting your savings into property for the future is that you can be pretty certain that, as a long-term investment, your money will safely increase in value in line with inflation. Many people are turning to property investment instead of pension schemes, as we hear the horror stories of countries such as the UK, where people have invested all their lives into their pension schemes to find that now their money is relatively worthless. Houses automatically earn what is known as capital gains. That is, for every year you own the property, it becomes more valuable and often gives a better rate of interest on your money than most banks do. However, that is not to say there are no risks. There are people who buy property when the market is high and prices are inflated beyond their true value, only to find that when the housing market slows down, they are in a state of negative equity. Negative equity is a situation that arises when you owe more for the house than the house itself is worth. In short, the best advice is to be aware of the ups and downs of the housing market. Property investment, if handled correctly, can be enormously satisfying. I hope that this has given you an insight into the basics of the property market. Thank you for listening. Please raise your hand if you have any questions and I will try to be of assistance.
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to Section 3. Test 7, Section 3. You will hear two business studies students discussing a presentation they'll do on an article on working effectively in groups. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 26. Now listen and answer questions 21 to 26.
So, Brad, what did you think of the article on group work?
Oh, hi, Helen. Yeah, it was pretty good, with helpful pieces of advice on how to make group work effective.
I think we were lucky to be given such a straightforward text to present at the management skills seminar.
Yeah. Actually, shall we discuss it now? Have you got time?
Sure, it's only a 10-minute presentation. So we just need to explain and then give our views on the main points raised in the article.
I'll jot down some notes. Right.
So, there are 3 main sections. I suggest we start with listening.
Yeah, effective listening in groups, because it's not something that's frequently covered on courses in our field.
No, and we should say that in the presentation.
Yeah. And also effective listening's pretty simple, you know. I don't think it's hard to learn.
Well, people think it's easy, but in my experience, most of us tend to be very lazy listeners.
Okay, I wouldn't argue with that.
Something I do think we should emphasize is the power of the listener's posture, gestures, etc., in making speakers feel respected.
Not that you're just waiting for them to finish before jumping in with your own ideas.
Uh-huh.
Okay, right. The next section is on goal setting. Let's make sure we're clear what the article says on this.
Yeah. Well, firstly, it says that all group members must be given time to explain their own goals.
That's it, yeah.
And then did it say that the whole group should agree on common goals?
That's a bit too strong. It's more that everyone's agendas should be equally acceptable. But it does say that goals have to be realistic, you know.
Achievable within a particular time?
You've got it. That's really what the article's saying. There isn't really any point in having ideals if group members know they won't come to anything within a reasonable period. So, I think a summary covering those points will be enough for that part of the presentation, don't you?
Yep. Now, the last section is about conflict resolution.
Actually, I thought it was the worst part of the article.
Me too.
I don't think it went into sufficient detail on the issue.
Actually, I thought it devoted too much space to it, but that it was all rather boring, you know?
It didn't mention some of the more radical theories.
Absolutely. I found that really irritating.
Right, and also I think it could have said more about conflict sometimes being healthy in groups.
Absolutely. It just mentioned rather glibly about how we should avoid thinking of winners and losers, and that quick resolution of conflict is always desirable.
Without explaining what these terms mean?
Well, it gives quite detailed definitions, but doesn't develop a proper argument.
Right. So, for the presentation, I think we just give some definitions and
then explain what we felt were the weaknesses in the article's treatment of conflict resolution.
Yeah, good.
Now you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
So, let's think about what we have to prepare for the actual presentation.
Well, I suppose we'll use PowerPoint, but I'm hopeless at using it, especially if it has any visuals. I really have to look into doing a course on it because I know I'll need it in the future.
Don't worry, I'm quite happy using PowerPoint and I'll put it together when everything else is ready.
That's a relief. But yes, do that later.
Okay. Now, I heard the tutor saying we have to include some well-chosen quotations from the article.
I'm not sure if we do. I'll email him to find out.
No need. I can just have a look at the specs he gave us when he set the task.
That'll be quicker.
But the tutor definitely said we have to prepare a handout to go with the talk. I'm not really sure how we do that.
Sarah did one last year.
Who's she?
She's doing the same option as me on marketing. I'll ask her advice on what to include.
Great. So that just leaves the bibliography at the end. I suppose it'll mainly be articles.
Yeah, so we'll just look on the web, and we can leave that till later.
But we've been advised against that.
Well, we could have a look through some journals in the library.
I think we should start by looking through module handbooks. I think that'll give us some good leads.
Yeah, you're probably right. So, that's all the topics.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Part 4.
You will hear a lecturer in education talking about some experiments done in the USA to investigate the effects of reducing class sizes. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
All over the world, there are passionate arguments going on about how educational systems can be improved. And of all the ideas for improving education, few are as simple or attractive as reducing the number of pupils per teacher. It seems like common sense. But do these ideas have any theoretical basis? Today, I want to look at the situation in the USA and at some of the research that has been done here in America on the effects of reducing class sizes. In the last couple of decades or so, there has been considerable concern in the United States over educational standards here, following revelations that the country's secondary school students perform poorly relative to many Asian and European students. In addition, statistics have shown that students in the nation's lower-income schools in the urban areas have achievement levels far below those of middle-class and upper-middle-class schools. So would reducing class sizes solve these problems? Well, we have to remember that it does have one obvious drawback. It's expensive. It requires more teachers and possibly more classrooms, equipment, and so on. On the other hand, if smaller classes really do work, the eventual economic benefits could be huge. Better education would mean that workers did their jobs more efficiently, saving the country millions of dollars. It would also mean that people were better informed about their health, bringing savings in things like medical costs and days off sick. So what reliable information do we have about the effects of reducing class sizes? There's plenty of anecdotal evidence about the effect on students' behavior, but what reliable evidence do we have for this? Let's have a look at 3 research projects that have been carried out in the USA in the last couple of decades or so. The first study I'm going to look at took place in the state of Tennessee in the late 1980s. It involved some 70 schools. In its first year, about 6,400 students were involved, and by the end of the study, 4 years later, the total number involved had grown to 12,000. What happened was that students entering kindergarten were randomly assigned to either small classes of 13 to 17 students or regular-sized classes of 22 to 26. The students remained in whatever category they had been assigned to through the 3rd grade. And then, after that, they joined a regular classroom. After the study ended in 1989, Researchers conducted dozens of analyses of the data. Researchers agree that there was significant benefit for students in attending smaller classes, and it also appears that the beneficial effect was stronger for minority students. However, there's no agreement on the implications of this. We still don't know the answer to questions like how long students have to be in smaller classes to get a benefit, and how big that benefit is, for example. The second project was much larger and took place in California. Like the Tennessee study, it focused on students from kindergarten through to grade 3, but in this case, all schools throughout the state were involved. The experiment is still continuing, but results have been very inconclusive, with very little improvement noted. And the project has, in fact, also had several negative aspects. It meant an increased demand for teachers in almost all California districts. So the better-paying districts got a lot of the best teachers, including a fair number that moved over from the poorer districts. And there were a lot of other problems with the project. For example, there weren't any effective procedures for evaluation. All in all, this project stands as a model of what not to do in a major research project. A third initiative took place in the state of Wisconsin at around the same time as the California project began, and it's interesting to compare the two. The Wisconsin project was small. Class sizes were reduced in just 14 schools, but it was noteworthy because it targeted schools at which a significant proportion of the students were from poor families, compared with California's one-size-fits-all approach. Analysts have found that the results are very similar to the Tennessee project, with students making gains that are statistically significant, and that are considerably larger than those calculated for the California initiative. Now, I'd like to apply some of these ideas to the latest.
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
At 29 and I find myself wondering what did happen to the last 10. I ran away with my life, fast forward, never turn back again. It's kind of funny that the more we pass time, the more we need to set the rewind. And 19 was the year I had to leave you, but now I'm seeing all the signs. Is this really happening? I can't believe it's true. I'm just as surprised as you.